Hello, family. Welcome to another episode of the Black Men's Roundtable. I am your host and moderator, Rodney Butler. And today, we are going to be talking about mental health, specifically Black men's mental health. And we're going to be covering topics like building resilience, about healing from trauma, about overcoming stereotypes, emotional intelligence and vulnerability, and a host of other topics. To talk about those topics today, we have our panelist today, Andrew Gordon. I'm going to introduce Andrew. Andrew, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Andrew. Andrew has a passion for mental health. His passion began at Florida, at Fort Valley State University, where he earned his BA in psychology. After spending some time in the clinical field, he later pursued his master's degree in school counseling, where he served as school counselor right here in Douglasville. Today, he is a licensed professional counselor and self-proclaimed mental health advocate and founding clinician of the Yellow Bridge Therapy Center. And we're glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, Andrew, before we dive into these very important subjects, first of all, I just want to thank you for being here today. You are the first panelist that I've had on where you're the only person. So, but I do feel that mental health, specifically Black men's mental health, is of such importance that we wanted to give you our undivided attention, because we know that you are very well versed in this field. We plan on having you back as many times as we think we need to have you back, and to help our community break down some of these stereotypes and some of this tabooism, when it comes down to mental health. So without further ado, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience before we get started on the topics?
Yeah, once again, Andrew Gordon, founder and owner of the Yellow Bridge Therapy Center. We do not have a brick and mortar location. All our sessions are done virtually. So if you are somebody or somebody you know that is an adult that is seeking therapy or mental health services, you can reach out to us. We can provide our information at the end, as well as our phone number and email address. But we're also on social media as well as _BeTheBridge. Thank you.
Yeah, and so like you said, hang on to the end, because he will put out his information as far as how you can get in contact with him. But also do not forget, for our audience who are live streaming, please, if you have any questions, get those questions in. We will, at the very end, we will have about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how long our topics go, in order for us to answer some of those questions, or in order for Andrew to answer some of those questions, because I can't. But that being said, Andrew, we're going to go right into resilience. Everybody, people deal with all kind of different situations differently, obviously, right? But to stay the course, to be resilient, to hang in there, is a lot of times the problems or the issues that we see when it comes down to with mental health, and people are not able to do a lot of times. It's just hang on, to hang in there, to have that, to be resilient. For our first topic, I want you to take kind of a deep dive, not necessarily a deep dive, but talk to us about how we can better build resilience when we think we are having certain kinds of mental issues or mental crises.
Good question. So resilience typically means to be able to bounce back or recover, right? And so when you're faced with some kind of mental health challenge or mental illness, it's very hard for you to get past or get back to normalcy, right? And so, I'm a huge advocate for therapy, and I believe that if you get into therapy, you can be able to process a lot of those challenges that you've been dealing with. Resiliency doesn't just mean you have to do it by yourself, right? you have a social network of friends and family members that you may just need to be able to talk to, right? Getting into therapy and finding the right therapist that is for you, because every therapist may not be for you. And so I always want to encourage people, give it a try, you know what I mean? And so ways that you can continue to build on that resilience, journaling, right? Talking to someone, doing things that you used to do before, right? It's all about that recovery and, like I said, bouncing back. It's not an easy process, but with time and commitment, and truly knowing what you want to focus on and what you want to be better at or get back to, you'll be able to find that resilience. So hopefully I answered that question, and finding ways to continue to build on to being resilient.
No, absolutely. One of the things that I heard you say was journaling, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times we hear in all the other kinds of aspects of life, right? If you really want it, if you really want to achieve it, then write it down.
Right.
So what you're saying is that even in mental health, that same rule applies. Could you talk a little bit more about maybe an experience or some experience that you may have had with the effectiveness of journaling or writing it down?
Right, absolutely. So often we're not able to process, on our own. And so that's why we oftentimes can be dependent on somebody else to hear us out. Well, to me, journaling is like talking to a therapist at times, because I'm able to get these thoughts out of my head, right? And I'm able to process it. Now that it's on paper, I can see it in front of me. I can read it over. All right, now does this really make sense, right? Because these thoughts that I've been thinking, maybe they haven't been rational, right? Maybe there's no fact to back them up. And now that I wrote it down versus speaking it out loud, right? You know what I'm saying? Now I can actually process what I've been thinking, right? Also, man, I think it's so powerful to get these thoughts out of your head, because now they have a place to live on this piece of paper, on this journal. Now these thoughts can be here, and I don't have to think about it so often or so long, right? I encourage a lot of my clients, if you're truly faced with some challenges and it's just kind of keeping you up at night, start journaling, start writing, and now you can try your best to go back to sleep, right? Because now those thoughts have a place. And so when I wake up in the morning, and if I need to continue to think about them, I know exactly where I can go to think about it, because I have so many other things in this day that I have to do and get done. And if these intrusive thoughts or these irrational thoughts continue to harp, then it's going to be very hard for me to function in my day-to-day and completing my normal day-to-day tasks.
Yeah, well, hey, look, that's exactly what I was trying to get to, because I think that, like I said, across the board, when we write stuff down, then we kind of tend to live on it, right? And so I just think that a lot of people never think about journaling when it comes down to mental health.
Yeah.
But, we read at night, we write, to help put ourselves to sleep. But I also know people journal at nighttime as well. So why not journal some of these thoughts or some of these things so I think that was great.
But even like a to-do list, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Tomorrow I want to focus on these things, right? But if I keep thinking about them tonight, then I probably won't be able to get some sleep, right? And I can even prioritize these different thoughts as far as this to-do list. So that way when I wake up in the morning, now I'm waking up with purpose. Now I'm waking up with a mission, you know what I'm saying? So when I wake up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, I can immediately go straight to my to-do list, right? And oftentimes I encourage people to write it on, do it on their phone, right? Phone's right next to the bed. First thing you're gonna open up is your phone. And if you leave the notes section open, right? The notes app open, immediately as soon as you open up the phone, boom, my to-do list is right there. Or the things that I've been thinking about is right there. And so now I can focus on them, So again, I truly believe it gives you purpose in the morning. And it's a great start to the day.
2 takeaways I got from that, man. Waking up with purpose, and then leaving your note section open. So it's the very first thing that you see. That's outstanding. Waking up with purpose. Pin it. Pin it.
It's important,
It's important. Pin it. Waking up with purpose.
If you don't, then you kind of just floating, right?
I mean, can you imagine waking up like that every morning? with the tidbits that you've given, I mean, I could just think about how much better my day would go. Just doing those couple of little things, you know. But yeah. So,
Mindset is everything, man. So the way you start your day off mentally, affects how everything goes physically.
yeah.
You know.
True on that. All right. Trauma. Of course, we can't talk about mental health unless we talk about trauma. And people, from what I understand about trauma can come from, a lot of times, trauma is not what necessarily just happened, but something that just happened triggered something that happened a long time ago, or at least something in the past. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long time ago. It could be something from this morning, I guess. But I think nowadays, I think we have a pretty good understanding of what trauma is, because people talk about trauma a lot, right? And you see trauma, you see the word trauma on a lot of things, trauma center, you see it a lot. But what I don't think we have a good understanding is healing from trauma. Actually healing from the things that have caused us, some kind of mental anguish from our past, way back when, or maybe it's just yesterday. Let's take a dive into talking about healing trauma.
Gotcha. Personal story. Freshman at Fort Valley State University, my father committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
And, I was actually studying biology. And when that happened, it kind of transitioned me into really wanting to know, like, well, where was his head at? What was going on in his mind, during that time. So I transitioned to psychology. No, I didn't still figure out what was going on with him, but it provided me with a gateway to understanding, how the mind works. And, what I definitely understand is, when we are faced with some kind of traumatic event, it affects our thoughts and our emotions, and what we've learned over time is the way we think affects how we feel, and how we feel affects how we behave or how we act in this world. And so one of the strategies that I don't even know if somebody taught me back then was to journal, right? And it was not journaling just to get my thoughts down. It was journaling to have a conversation with my father. And what I try to exercise or express to many of my clients who are dealing with some kind of trauma, first identify what it is, and then identify how it affects you. And so often we hear that men say, well, I don't have emotions, or I'm emotionless, or I don't show emotions. And my girl want me to show, emotion and be, and talk more. Well, you just show emotions differently. You think that because you don't look like everybody else, you don't have them, but you actually do. And so, my self-care strategies, getting back to things that you used to do, getting out in the sun, drinking some water, you know what I'm saying? These are all great strategies that you can do, when you're dealing with these emotions. Definitely talking to a therapist and not dealing with these emotions and these thoughts by yourself. You can talk to your mom, you can talk to your friends, but they can only deal with so much for so long, And so I think it's very important that we create more mental health advocates that understand trauma and trauma-based counseling or trauma-based therapy, because you can walk outside and experience a traumatic event and then go home, and then you walk in the house and your wife doesn't understand what just happened, and you can't even put it into words what you're feeling in that moment. You just know that you're feeling something, but you can't express it. And so I think I kind of went around the world with that.
Oh, no, because trauma, man, we really need to, like I said, I really want to take a deep dive. You talked about talking to your mom, talking to your sister, or whoever it may be, family member. When we think about trauma in the Black community, okay, we, of course, was always taught that if you experience trauma, and if you talk about that, then that's a sign of weakness, right? We were taught to, hey, talk to your mama. talk to your grandma, talk to your preacher, talk to these people have biases, you know, not on purpose or not, you know, but they are unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And so let's get a little specific in the black community on the harm of talking to your mama, your preacher, instead of a professional licensed therapist or someone who really kind of knows the ins and outs of trauma and mental health.
Gotcha. Good question. Well, oftentimes, you know, in the black community, we're in survival mode, you know, and so, you know, whatever the standpoint that they may come from, maybe come from their experience in having to be in survival mode, you know. Can you ask the question one more time so I make sure I heard it all together?
I wanted you to get a little bit more, and you're doing it, getting a little bit more specific, because our trauma is different from everybody else's trauma, probably on the planet right now.
Right.
Because our experience, our history is different from everybody else's experiences and trauma on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So we have specific things that affect us that other people may not understand, or they just don't have it, whether it's epigenetically, just built inside of our gene pool or whatever you want to call it. But our trauma is a little different. So you started talking about, and just continue what you're saying about how different it is, or how dangerous it can be for us to utilize some of the advice that we've been given over decades about talk to your preacher, talk to your mama, talk to your brother, talk to your whatever, when we really need to be talking to professionals.
Absolutely. So again, absolutely, their biases may come from survival mode and just their experiences alone, but also just the stigma of talking to somebody that's a therapist, right? This idea has been created that you don't go outside the household and tell anybody your business, you know? And oftentimes I'll ask my client, like, what is it like for you to come to me and tell a stranger all about your business, you know? And so as we continue to try to survive in this world, grandma is only going to be able to tell you from her experience and how she has dealt with things. But a therapist is not his job or her job to tell you really anything, right? This is your opportunity to be heard, you know what I mean, and to be vocal. And oftentimes what we learn is our primary caregivers, right? Mom, dad, grandma, you know, all of those, like, they tell us to be independent. They tell us that you can come talk to me, you know, you can talk to me about anything. But once they kind of shut down your feelings and you don't feel heard, now you're not listening. Now the primary caregivers aren't the primary people that you want to talk to anymore, you know, because their sound advice doesn't make you feel safe. It doesn't make you feel comfortable, you know what I mean, to trust what they're saying is going to truly help you and to serve you when you get back out here in this world, you know. And so again, you know, just from experience, they're not listening, you know what I'm saying? If anything, they're listening to speak and not really listening to hear. And that's why it's important to get with a therapist or a mental health professional who can truly listen to you, to hear what you're saying, and then kind of share their perspective on what you're saying, and maybe some tools that you can use to counter those emotions or manage those emotions in a more healthy and productive way.
I like that, man. Listening to speak instead of listening to actually hear what you're saying. I think a lot of times family do that. Again, not on purpose, but they're really just trying to get out what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
And they're active listening, but they're just really trying to get out what they're trying to say. But and we say, you know, talk to grandma, talk to the minister, the preacher, and all this kind of stuff, right?
You can talk to me. Yeah, you can talk to me.
But the thing of it is a lot of times these people have their own trauma.
Yeah.
They black just like me and you.
Yeah.
And so a preacher or a grandmother, they are not exempt from trauma.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they are the worst because of generational trauma. And I would like for you to just talk a little bit about, because our, and I know I talked a little bit about epigenetics and stuff like that, but our generation, I mean, our trauma, unlike a lot of other people's, different ethnic groups, the trauma is not so much passed down. The trauma is initiated with that kid. But with this kid, with this African American kid, the trauma is a lot of times may be generational. Before we move on to the next topic, talk a little bit about generational trauma and the effect that it may have in our community, in the Black community specifically.
Wow, yes sir. So conditional, right? You know what I mean? The way grandma dealt with something, the way granddad dealt with something is almost how they see that we should deal with it as well. And if we don't deal with it how they dealt with it, or if our experience isn't similar to their experience, then we ain't been through nothing. You know what I mean? So now it's kind of shut down. Your feelings are null and void now. And that's the sad part about it, because this is your primary caregiver and you're coming to them to be heard, because you told me that I could trust you. You told me that I wouldn't be criticized or judged, but because of their experience, they're projecting that onto you as if you should be able to deal with whatever you're dealing with the way I dealt with it, or you didn't have to work how I worked, or you didn't have to slave how I slaved, so therefore what you're going through is nothing. You know what I mean? And that's how people can make you feel, and therefore again, I don't want to talk to you anymore because of how you made me feel. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully I answered.
And a lot of times we don't remember what people, I know it's definitely true with me, I may not remember what you say,
yeah,
but I definitely remember how you made me feel.
Maya Angelou.
And so I think that we need to understand the uniqueness of some of the things that we've had to deal with, and a lot of it is because of enslavement, because of having things ripped away from you and those kind of things. And so what happens is just the act itself creates trauma. The act of enslavement, the act of, taking your religion, your language, and all this other kind of stuff, it creates trauma because we don't know how to go back and be able to look at, 300 years, 400 years ago and say, okay, this is how they might have dealt with it, because we don't necessarily have that history.
Granddaddy just didn't say nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He just stayed to himself. My dad just stayed to himself. And so that's how you kind of learn to deal with those emotions or those thoughts. But that's not healthy.
It's not healthy at all.
We're learning that every day, that's not healthy. And so again, we need more mental health advocates, man. What you're doing here is advocating for mental health.
Oh, absolutely. It's very, very important.
And creating a space for people to come listen.
And we gotta, in our families, we, everybody got that uncle or that cousin or whatever who lives above the kitchen stove or something, right? And it only comes down, certain times of the year, Thanksgiving, you push his plate up underneath it.
Right.
That's mental health. And we have to understand that is not right. But we begin to accept that.
Right. Let me correct you. That's mental illness.
That's mental illness.
Yes, sir.
That's mental illness. That is mental illness, and
that hasn't been dealt with, and it's almost like it's been brushed under the rug, or grandma is able to manage, or mom is able to manage, but then when that seasoned veteran passes on, and this person never dealt with any of their challenges, never got any therapy, dealt with depression or anxiety the majority of their lives, or even schizophrenia, and it's just been kind of, all right, well, we're dealing with it, well, we don't keep it quiet. Well, again, that's not healthy for anybody, and now it's almost not fair to the individual that's dealing with it, because they don't have the tools necessary or the medication, to service them.
Right. Because, as you know, Kev, we had a lot of those black service member men to come back from the Vietnam War. A lot of these guys were on the front lines. They were put right out there in the action. They come back, a lot of them got strung out on different kinds of drugs. I think at the time, heroin was one of the bigger ones. And they came back with mental health issues and they stuck them up in those rooms, upstairs or in the basement somewhere. And I'm just glad that we're kind of moving on from a lot of that kind of stuff. But most of the people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder are not even military-related people. There are people who live in the hood. You know, they hear more stuff since they've been little bitty kids than a lot of other people would ever think about seeing or hearing inside the military. But before we move on from this topic, Andrew, I wanted to talk another specifically about black men and how black men have a tendency to, you know, we don't cry, we don't let our emotions, but because it's so tied to trauma, and now overcoming stereotypes and other things, I would specifically talk about black men, just to give you a heads up, because it is the Black Men's Roundtable. But I want for you to talk a little bit more specifically about black men and some of the things that black men may need to stop doing, or may not, or need to do better in dealing with trauma, especially the silence with black men specifically, before we move on to the next topic.
To say black men need to stop doing something, that's a challenge, right? Because we have to give grace to everybody, right? But one thing that we can encourage black men to do is be honest with themselves, right? And pay attention to your behaviors. Because it's easy to say that I don't have any emotions, or I don't express my emotions the same way, you know, because I don't cry, or, you know, I don't talk about it. But what you actually have been doing is you've been distancing yourself from your family, or you'll withdraw, or you'll leave the house, right? Or you'll drink, you'll smoke, you'll have sex with, you know, multiple women, you know what I mean? So you turn to unhealthy behaviors, right? Because you're still holding these feelings or these emotions within, because you don't feel like you can express it the same way. And it kind of goes back to those primary caregivers, right? So if my mom says that or my dad says you can talk to me, but then when I do talk to you and you start yelling at me, now I'm not comfortable talking to you anymore. Or you make me feel like it's not safe to go out here in this world and talk to anybody or share how I feel. And so now I can't trust people the same, right? Because you're my mom, you're my dad, you're my aunt, grandmother, whoever, and I look up to you. But you made me feel like it's not safe. So therefore, I get with a woman, well, she probably gonna do me just how my mom did me. You know what I'm saying? Or I gotta treat women like this because of my experiences in the past when I tried to be vulnerable, right? And so as black men, we gotta be very mindful, if anything, not just stop, but be mindful of our behaviors, right? Because again, our thoughts and emotions lead to our behaviors. So once we can check our thoughts and change our perspective on how we see the world, we can change how we feel, and therefore how we act or respond to different stimulus or different situations.
So a lot of the, you talked about kind of overindulging, right? So a lot of times, the brothers out here thinking, okay, we associate mental crises with, you know, doing drugs, so something must be going on in his head, drinking too much and all those things, right? But you got a whole host of other things that a lot of the behaviors that you may think is cool, like over-sexing. That could be trauma. You can do, we do self-destructive behaviors when you know, and sometimes it manifests itself in all kind of different places, in all kind of different things. I think anytime you're overindulging, that is, it's kind of like the very first sign of dehydration is thirst, right? Just to be thirsty is your first symptom of dehydration. Well, sometimes, you know, you may think because you have to eat that extra layer of the extra piece of cake, that it's just, I just want another piece of cake. But you know that you shouldn't be doing it, right? So if we can close it out with some behaviors that we may not think about that is actually connected to trauma. Other than drinking and drugs.
Right. Well, depression and anxiety, right? That can stem from trauma, right? I always tell my friends, no offense to anybody, but you can look at a man's stomach and tell that he's been going through something, right? Or how he deals with stress by looking at his gut. You know what I mean? Because like your diet, your exercise, things that you used to do and enjoy, all of a sudden you're not doing anymore. So what happened? What is preventing you? What is that mental block that's getting in your way, or what is that physical ailment that may be holding you back? And so again, depression, whatever, being sexually abused or physically or touched in the wrong way, or witnessing police brutality, any of those things can cause you to feel stress or depressed or dealing with anxiety. We know anxiety to be something that you may see in the future, all right, that may not happen. And depression typically stems from something that happened in your past. And so based off how you deal with those feelings or those thoughts is going to show in your world. And so this is how you deal with trauma today. So again, many men may say, well, I don't express myself, or I don't talk about my feelings, and that's what women do. Well, again, my brother, you're just showing it in a different way. And so when we can learn how to truly be vocal, right, and be comfortable with being vocal and identifying those emotions that we're continuing to deal with every day, right? When we can do that, man, then we can truly grow and truly heal. One thing I wanted to leave you with, though, is forgiveness, right? Whoever wronged you in your past, whoever hurt you, you know what I mean? If you don't forgive that person and forgive yourself from whatever resentment or remorse that you're dealing with, it's going to be an even longer journey and process of healing. And so first things first, man, you got to learn to forgive. And that doesn't mean I got to go up to you and say, hey, I forgive you. In my heart, I got to forgive. So that way I can heal and move on from this. Or I'm going to continue to experience these traumatic events, as if they happened just yesterday. So, thank you, man, for asking these great questions.
Oh, absolutely, man. That's what we're here for. Inquiring minds want to know. We're going to move into stereotypes. Because especially in our community, the stereotypes behind, around mental health, but also the stereotypes that are projected on us as African Americans. What I mean by that is, because I know a lot of black men cannot understand how, for instance, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. It's Anthony something, but anyway, he was a former Air Force guy, right down in Atlanta about 3 or 4 years ago, and he was butt naked.
I know you're talking about.
Remember that?
Yeah.
No clothes. I don't even think the guy had a chain on his neck. And in obvious mental distress. Right?
Illness.
And it's amazing, because again, it's a Black Men's Roundtable, so it's amazing the way black men look at that is that this is a naked veteran who is having a mental situation, and you gun him down, cold blood. Yet, some white guy who's fully clothed with God knows what underneath his clothing situation, and you find empathy or you find sympathy and you find understanding that it must be some kind of mental health issue for cops, who the first ones to proclaim, we're not trained in mental health. Seem to be when it comes down to certain people.
Right.
So I want to say, when we talk about stereotypes, I want to talk about stereotypes in both ways. Stereotypes within our community, but also stereotypes without our community, in the way that other people look at our people, especially black men, You know, we're 12 years old, they're saying we're 25. Stuff like that. So let's talk about overcoming some of the stereotypes of mental health.
Gotcha. So, are you referring to like coming to therapy as far as like the stereotype that?
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as coming to therapy, how we the way we, like I said, with internally,
Yeah.
the way that is passed down, mental health advocacy is passed down. As far as it being, as far as the stereotypes associated with it, but also once I think we've had enough of that, then I want to talk about the stereotypes that other people have when it comes down to our mental health.
Gotcha.
But I'll lead you definitely into it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, as far as the police providing warning shots to other people, I just know how that can affect how it affected me. Right. I can only really speak to myself. I haven't yet to deal with a client or work with a client that has been dealt with police brutality yet. Sure it'll happen one day, but I haven't yet. But I just know, even as a therapist,
Hopefully
even
not.
as somebody that has the training and the tools, right? I still get scared. You know what I'm saying? I still get worried if somebody is about to pull me over. I'm still looking all around, as far as what could happen, right? And I know that's not always rational, but it's true, right? And so, oftentimes, you may see us being angry, right? But it's really fear. You know what I'm saying? It's really anxiety because I want to go home. You know what I'm saying? Like my children need me to be present, and I can't imagine a world where they grow up, where their dad is not there.
Right.
And so that constant fear, is constantly there. But I also believe in preparing myself if it does happen. You know what I mean? I don't drive under the influence of anything. I don't put myself in positions, even though sometimes it's not even under my control, right? I try my very best to not put myself in positions where something negative could happen, right? Because that stereotype is going to be there, right? And Rodney, what I've also learned is, in this world, I can't change or control anybody but myself, right? This person is going to do exactly what they wanted to do when they first woke up, right? And regardless of what I say to them, what I present to them, I can't change that. And so as men, as black men, as people, right, we have to recognize that we can't change anybody or control anybody's actions. We can only focus on ourselves. And so in closing, I just want to make sure that people understand, truly focus on what you can control and what you can do, because it's a difficult world to live in, and there's no one right answer on how to live in this world, right? But you got to do what you got to do, like the old folks say, to survive.
Yeah. I often say, if you want to lynch me, that's your problem. But if you have the power to lynch me,
makes sense.
that's my problem.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And so you talked about that you can't control what somebody think when they first wake up in the morning. We're still talking stereotypes.
Right.
And you're right, you can't control someone's thought pattern when they first wake up. But here's the thing. I don't believe hardly anybody wake up and say, not even a cop or anybody, I'm going to go and make some black person's life miserable today. I just don't believe they wake up and say that.
We hope.
Well, we hope.
Yeah, sociopath is real though.
Well, I know sociopath is real. It's
yeah.
real. But sociopathy is, I believe, rare. But you're the expert. Well, maybe not. Okay.
It happens.
It happens. Okay. But either way, I just don't believe the average person. Let me just put it that way.
Absolutely.
Wake up and say, I'm going to go and just spoil some black person's life or day. But because of stereotypes, okay, you didn't wake up with that at 7:30 this morning. But by 7:30 in the evening, something, stereotypes and otherwise, made you do that
Yeah.
to that person.
Yeah.
So I definitely hear what you're saying about we can only control what we can control. I never try to control what's in a person's heart
Right.
because we can't. I don't care about your heart. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you have stereotypes of me. But what I care about is your policies.
Right.
And so what I want to say is that when we talk about, the stereotypes themselves, don't it cause some kind of stereotypes within our own community and stereotypes without coming from outside of our community? Don't that in itself causes some kind of undue stress,
Pressure.
and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff?
Have you all ever like told your family or your children that you got to be better than the next man, or you got to be 10 times better than the next man? So is that not a stereotype? Is that not pressure that we're adding, onto our children because are we focused on what somebody else is doing, or are we focused on what we're doing? And so to your question, yes, it is pressure. It's I can't think of the other word, but it can become a lot. And what we start as kids say today is, I'm built different. You know what I mean? And so some people can handle that pressure and some can't. And so what do we do with that, right? And so again, back to those stereotypes and overcoming them. It's all about what we listen to, because I think every household, black or white or Hispanic, it's all about what the parents are teaching, right? Because a lot of this stuff starts in the household, right? And we talked about like going back to grandma, and whatever grandma is teaching or a granddad is teaching is what you start first develop. You know what I'm saying? What you're first taught, right? Until you go out into the world and experience something different. Then you say, okay, well, I just been to Italy and all white people aren't like that. You know what I'm saying? Or all, Hispanic people aren't like that, or all Asian people aren't like that. But I think it's just, environment for one, right? But also, going back to household. And so, what we're taught at home, we exercise, until we're taught something different.
Yeah. Well, makes a lot of sense, and I just want to add to that is that not every household is treated equally, obviously.
Right.
And not every household has the same resources,
Right.
human and otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand that sometimes we have to, whether it's policy and other things, we have to do other things in order to help those who maybe don't have the resources.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we have to, so for all of our, audience out there that's listening that says, hey, I work 3 jobs, just trying to put food on the table. So a lot of times, the stereotypes that their children may see on their devices is stuff that they don't want them to see, because it may be projecting or inflating a stereotype that maybe already exists, and to make other people even more afraid. So we have to be able to just understand that not everybody got the same resources, but you are absolutely right. It starts at home, but home is different for a lot of people.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But
All right.
even the stereotype around therapy, right?
Yeah.
And as a black therapist, a black man, like when my clients, when they first sit down with me, like I do my very best to make them as comfortable as possible, because I know that, this may be the only opportunity or the only test, that they actually do to see what is therapy really about. You know what I'm saying? And so if I don't create that space or that environment for them to be comfortable, then, I could lose them. And so me being a mental health advocate, I do my very best to make sure that they stay. And, even when you want to do a consultation with me and, I'm really not sure about, therapy and all that stuff. And, well, let's just try it for one or 2 sessions. You know what I'm saying? Like, just to kind of see, where it goes, because so many people, are still leery about, therapy and, working with a black man, or just we're not working with a black man, but finding a black male therapist and not working with anybody else that doesn't look like them. And so, 25% of black people go to therapy, and it's less than 1% of black male therapists out here. And so that number is very low as far as black male therapists being able to provide the service to black people, right? And so, I just want to make sure that everybody hears that. If you're going to college, study psychology, study mental health, man, because we really do need it, man. You have therapists committing suicide because they're overworked and overwhelmed, because not only are they dealing with their clients' issues, they're trying to support them, but they're also dealing with their own at home too. And so, that's why we really need more advocates, man, to support the field, because it's forever growing, but we just don't have enough people to service.
Yeah, well, I talked to my brother-in-law who is in school right now for psychology, and I told him he better be watching, because I told him that this is going to be a very important show tonight, and so I hope he heard all your statistics but he's dead set on following exactly the path that you've been, because we know that the numbers are so low in black men therapists out there. So I think you just did an outstanding recruiting tool for him. But with that being said, because you kind of brought it up, how important do you think it is for black men to seek out black therapists for their care?
It's such a loaded question, right? But I think it's very important for them to find somebody that looks like them. But if they don't find anybody that looks like them, whether it be male or whether it be male, then go look for a black female, right? You know what I'm saying? And depending on whatever it is, the goal is that you're trying to work on, that you're trying to get through, if she's clinically trained, or if it's the white man that's clinically trained, in trauma-based therapy, they can still help you too. They can still support you too. It's not always about if somebody can relate to your childhood or to your background. I think it's more like they can support you too because they're trained just how we're trained, right? I've been to a black man. I've been to 2 black women, right? I have yet to work with a white therapist yet, but I'm not opposed to it, depending on whatever my issues are, right? And so again, I think it's very important if they can find somebody, but if they can't, they still need to get in therapy and talk to somebody. You know what I mean? Because the longer you wait for a black man, and if he doesn't come available, then you're still going to be dealing with this trauma or this depression, this anxiety, or these mental health challenges, and you're still not getting any closer to healing. So to me, the bigger picture is heal, right? Forgive, heal. But if you can't find who you're looking for, then man, find somebody close. And if Jason Wilson, I'm not sure if y'all familiar with him, he said the same thing about the white male therapist that he was working with. And he was like, man, how can this white man tell me, about me and, help me deal with my issues? And he was like, I can't. I'm coming from a totally different background. I live in this state, you live in this state. I grew up in this city, grew up in that city. But I understand trauma, you know what I'm saying? And I understand how to help people heal from their past traumas. And so it had nothing to do with race, and he was able to get what he needed. And so I know this is a black male roundtable.
It's important because it's only 1%.
Yeah.
So you need to give them options.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. Don't get stuck on finding somebody that looks like you, right? Focus on finding somebody that can help you, right? And consultations, call these folks. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to go with the first person that answers the phone. Call 5 people, 5 therapists, 10 therapists, whoever, sounds good and you feel like they can help you. And if you do that first session, 1 through 4, and you find out, what, I'm not vibing with this person, I'm not meshing well with them, oblige and let them know, hey, this isn't working for me. I'm gonna keep looking. I don't believe that therapist is going to take it personal.
Right.
That, they're not the right fit for you. I think they knew that going in, that either I'm going to be the right fit or I'm not. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
And so, I think it's just important that we get into therapy, right? Because these challenges aren't going to just go away. They say, time heals all wounds, but that's not always true, right? It can hide those wounds, if we don't go ahead and deal with them when they happen.
And I think we can always learn from, even if the person is not able to help us, like you said, you don't have to stay with the person. If the person is not, do 1 or 2 sessions and, and move on, right? We don't keep the same primary care doctor that we don't think is helping us, right? We move on to another doctor. But we can learn from everybody. I remember, just before we go into emotional intelligence and vulnerability, I remember, and I'm not giving this lady an excuse. I forget exactly what I was listening to or reading. I think I was listening to something. But anyway, it talked about how back in the day, white women could not inherit. I mean, they could not have property. They can only inherit property, right? So when the plantation owner, the slave owner died or whatever, right? She inherited the slave, the people that were enslaved. So I heard about how the worst thing that people back during slavery, one of the worst things was that the white woman would inherit the slave, the people that were enslaved. And she was much worse than the white man enslaver. And so anyway, it's like, why? Right? Because Hollywood has portrayed the white woman as being the one to teach them to read and all this other cute stuff, but that was just not the facts. That was just not the truth. And it's documented that enslaved people would much rather have the white man. And so this other white woman, she actually said, let me put it to you, think about it like this, as to why she may have been worse. Now, she wasn't trying to make an excuse for the woman, because I wasn't going to accept an excuse anyway. Right. You can't do somebody like that and talk about some excuse. But it did make me think, and what she said was that, imagine, there was no way I could have ever imagined this without hearing her say this. Imagine being that white woman and you watching and you looking at all of these mulatto, that's what they called it back then, the mixed race children. It's a very terrible word, but imagine all these mixed race kids running around the plantation looking like your husband. I was like, whoa, I would have never thought of that. So the reason I say that is you can learn a perspective from anybody. Anybody can put you in their shoes and you can say, what in the world? I would have never thought about that. So I appreciate that you're saying that, look, there's only 1%. It'll be great that if every, African-American man could have a therapist that looked like him, but that's just not the case. And even if you don't like him, you might be able to learn something. Yeah. Because I learned something from that woman that day. Yeah. I don't accept what she's saying, but I would have never thought of that. My children looking like, all these enslaved black women. Right. So and like your husband, yeah. I mean. Yeah. So
she was hurt.
Like, she was hurt. Yeah. It's like, so she's worse than him because, of what she's experiencing, I guess, or whatever, right? But that's no excuse, but I'm just saying, I would have never thought about that. I'm not capable of thinking about her story like that. Last one. We have a few more minutes. Hopefully we'll have time to take questions from the audience if we have them. Emotional intelligence and vulnerability, which is the last topic. And how important, we talk about IQ, and I remember saying a long time ago, I don't need people with high IQ. I think I'm pretty smart. At least I think I am. I need people with high EQs, right? Emotional quality. Right. How important is emotional intelligence when we talk about trauma, and how is it built in to help us maybe even deal with trauma?
Wow. Well, again, we all know that we all deal with trauma, right? So if I'm an employer, right, and I go into work and I notice that my staff is quiet, or my staff is, just not as, well, a staff member, let's say that, is not herself or not himself, right? And I immediately go, well, business as usual, get to work, do what you're supposed to do, deal with it, right? That's not really emotionally intelligent, right? Emotional intelligence is me being able to identify how I feel in the moment and my behaviors from my feelings, but also be able to recognize it in other people, right? And so it's very, very important for parents to recognize it, and bosses, owners, whoever, to recognize it, therapists to recognize it, because if not, it's going to go unchecked, right? And now this person doesn't feel heard, doesn't feel seen, because it's almost like you're not even paying me any attention. You know what I mean? When you think about a husband and wife, I ask my wife up this all the time. Do you recognize when I'm not myself? You know what I mean? Can you recognize when I'm off, right? If my closet ain't together, you know what I'm saying? If my hair ain't cut, you know what I mean? Can you recognize when I'm experiencing something? And you know what I mean? Like, I think that's an important question to ask somebody, because again, like, they can't just expect you to be this person all the time, right? You're going to be vulnerable. You're going to be a human being, and I honestly feel like grace should always be given. And so, to be emotionally intelligent is to be able to be aware of your own emotions, but also somebody else's. Yeah.
Okay, great. I have a couple of other little questions to ask on that, but I know we're nearing the time because we took a deep dive in the first three, and I tell you, man, you did outstanding. That being said, what I want to do before we start closing out is I want to go to see if we have any questions in our audience. If we have any questions.
Yeah, I had a question.
Hold on 1 second. Kevin, could you? Appreciate it, Kevin.
When you talk about therapists, you say that it really doesn't matter the background. I think you said something to that effect.
Not necessarily the background, but the race.
But the race.
Yes, sir.
So it's interesting. If you're working with someone who has no understanding of your cultural background or any of the cultural conditions that you deal with on a daily basis, and you come to them and you're trying to articulate what you're going through, how can they really help if they have no understanding of what you're going through? And in most cases, most people, especially folks who are white, they don't really care about the background of folks. I worked in the clinical environment for 20 years. We dealt with that in terms of making sure that we found therapists whose working style or the background was culturally conducive to the clients that they had, because we kept running into that roadblock. So how does that happen?
So, but before you answer the question, I want to make sure, because I'm not sure if our online audience can hear the question or not. Basically, our audience member is asking if a therapist doesn't share your cultural background, how exactly can they be effective in helping you, with your situation? No.
Not if they don't share. If they have no understanding of your cultural background.
Okay, if they have no understanding. Okay.
No idea of the different variables that you deal with. We're talking about internalized racism, the role of the academic institutions, the role of policing, the role of audio visual images that we're bombarded with on a daily basis. They don't take notice of that, but we deal with it and we experience it.
All right. Okay. So does that make you more comfortable that they can relate to your background or your story? Does that bring more comfort to you because they also grew up in a similar city, neighborhood, background? Does that bring more comfort to you?
Absolutely.
Okay, and so are you not going to talk to this person at all because they don't know exactly where you come from?
What I want to avoid is the long explanation of trying to get them to understand where I'm coming from.
Right.
So when I'm sharing my challenges, they'll have a better understanding. I don't want to educate someone when I'm seeking, to protect my mental space.
Right.
We're not going there with theory. We need really actual experience.
Right.
What's going on.
And so how we explained earlier, because the percentage of black men therapists or even black women, right? I think it was only like 4% of black people that are therapists in this world right now. And so that's why I talked about, well, kind of feel some people out, right? Call a bunch of them until you can feel comfortable, right, with this person. And you can ask all these questions as far as their cultural background or what they understand or know about your particular background or culture. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying just jump with anybody, right? But talk to them first. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm black, but that means I could have grew up in Malibu, and I don't know what it's like to grow up in Miami. You know what I'm saying? And so just because you see me as a black man doesn't mean that I truly understand where you come from.
But if I'm talking about being profiled and the trauma that comes along with that, you can be from Beverly Hills, you can be from New Haven, it doesn't matter. We understand the experience and the trauma that it causes.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
That stigma is consistent.
Right.
Right? There's no way to avoid it because it's been embedded culturally throughout the system and internalized for so long. Right? So it almost got to a point where it became almost genetic that we feel the way we feel. Right? So when we are out here searching for these different things, or we are out here trying to find a therapist, right? The last thing I want to do is, like he said, educate a person just to figure out if that person can help you.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there's almost a prerequisite almost, right? Just for you to get to understand and conversate with me.
Right.
Right? If not, then it's just general speaking.
Right.
You know, like you said, generally they understand how to deal with trauma.
Right.
Generally they're educated to deal with different triggers. You see what I'm saying? But they don't. I'd rather sit with a person that has some grassroots understanding. Right? And I guess that comes from shopping around.
Very much so. And again, like I'm all in favor. Find you somebody that fits you, right? And so in that first 5 minutes, you can tell whether or not this person is going to be for me or not. You know what I'm saying? Based off your questions that you're going to ask them, like you'll know, okay, this probably ain't going to be the best person for me, so I'm going to keep shopping around. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like you go into the store and they're like, can I help you? Like, well, I'm just looking. You know what I'm saying? And then you be like, I'll be back, you know, but you ain't coming back. And that's okay. But shop around first. You know what I'm saying? Like, this person is here to service you, right? They're providing a service to you, right? And so you don't spend your money just anywhere, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you find out what's good for you, but in the meantime, in between time, you know, if you're suffering, right? How long do you just continue to suffer when I can't call my boys anymore? You know what I'm saying? I can't talk to anybody, so therefore I'm just gonna continue to internalize and deal with it on my own. But now the way I deal with it is unhealthy because now I have a family, right? You know what I'm saying? And me distancing myself or withdrawing or going for long drives just a process, or drinking, you know what I'm saying, or smoking weed, like that's not healthy for the family now, because I don't want to talk to anybody that doesn't look like me. You see what I'm saying? Like, so that's what I'm saying, man. Play the field. See what's out there. See who's out there for you. Because it could be a white person that talks to nothing but black people, right? And so now their perspective or experience is different. Yeah.
Well, before we take the next question, I fully understand what both you gentlemen are saying.
Yeah.
And because that's what I was saying earlier, it is like trauma within trauma that we have to deal with, you know, so much other stuff. It's unfortunate that so many people in our community, especially us, especially black men, we have to become professionals that we're not licensed or trained in, and it gets cumbersome of explaining your situation. We have to become almost licensed like this guy on the spot in order to make you, that's a lot, you know, but your typical white guy don't have to do that. He just maybe act a fool and whatever. It was because you're going to understand. He don't have to. So we end up having to take on professions. We have to become lawyers, doctors, therapists. All we have to do that on the spot. So I feel exactly what you're saying, but we need to get these numbers up. We hopefully programs, things like what we're doing right now, will do it. Hopefully, as black men continue to get a little bit more comfortable with talking to other black men and talking to each other and talking to our women in a certain kind of way, that we can not have so much of that on us.
75% of therapists are white. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's huge compared to the 4% and then of black therapists, and then less than 1% that are black men. You know what I'm saying? Like,
attracted me to this conversation.
Yeah.
Why I'm like, you coming out.
Glad you're here, brother.
The city I just moved from, we were having regular conversations about black men and mental health and black men protecting their spaces. So these conversations are critically important. We are sending our kids to college.
Yeah.
And as they choose careers, now when you talk about therapy, it becomes a new career option. When I was in college, that wasn't an option, wasn't considered. But because of the conversation and the dialogue, so I have much respect and I appreciate what y'all doing.
Oh, thank you. We're glad you're here, man.
We can get that 1% to at least 15.
We can do it. We can do it.
I
Kev?
agree. We gotta get it.
A little bit louder. Just a little bit.
Sorry, I have a little sister who is considered mentally retarded. I hate saying the word, and she has anxiety problems. And you know, she's very comfortable with her small circle of asking for advice. So why does she get it? How can our problem with her is her mindset and how she thinks. Not saying that I get this person right, but I am at an age where I can guide her not to make those, younger age, so how
As her sister, or as a therapist? Gotcha. And when you say she's mentally retarded, like, can she function normally? There you go. So you're saying that she functions better off systems, right? So as her sister, can you help her develop a system that works for her, right? And so if she's dealing with anxiety, can she identify what is the trigger, or what triggered her anxiety?
in that moment in time, if she was to have like an anxiety attack or something bothering her, she's able to recognize it.
Gotcha. And is she comfortable talking to you about it? But is it becoming a lot for you? No. So how long do you think you can do it, as far as listening to her I guess her concerns or her issues, right? Before it becomes too much. Yeah. Right. But could you find her somebody else to talk to that may be trained?
I might be able to help you out on this one a little
Okay.
bit. So is she school aged?
No, she's grown. She's 22.
Oh,
But
oh,
her
she's-
mindset will always be not her head.
Right. Okay. All right. Maybe I can't help you. I was going to, I'm a former educator and I'm a former special educator, so I was going to start asking you about IEPs and different things that maybe
Yeah.
the school can do. But
Right.
obviously she's 22, although she can still be in school at 22, with an IEP. But we're not going to go. So I think his advice is what you really need to kind of concentrate on.
Yeah, I try to help her find a therapist first, right? And maybe you all can do family counseling, right? So that way that therapist can kind of give you some guidance on how to better support her. You know what I mean? Not knowing her and not seeing her, like, I can't truly tell you what to do. But I think it'll be vital for you all to get some support. You know what I mean? Because, you want her to be more functional. You want her to be, more healthy minded. But you can't do that all on your own and still deal with what you got to deal with on your own as well. You know what I'm saying? And so and that's why I say, how long can you do it? Because, it's easy to say, man, I got my family back, I'm loyal, my brother's keeping all that. But at some point, it's going to be a lot. You know what I'm saying? And if you find your husband and your kids and all this, but yet you still got to take care of your sister. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's going to be a lot. So to put all that responsibility on you, that's a lot. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I say, man, try to get some help as well. So that way you can still be there for your sister and have her back and support her, but you're also getting the support too, to know, okay, am I making the right decisions? Am I making the right moves? Am I talking to her how I should be talking to her? You know what I'm saying? And somebody else can kind of help provide with a different lens, a different perspective. Yeah.
Appreciate the question. All right, great. So before we close it out, Andrew, you want to look in that camera and, I'm sorry? Oh, you have, got a little bit more time? Oh, you do it off camera? Okay, all right. What are we doing?
He said, right.
Go ahead, okay.
I just wanted to know, this isn't kind of quick, but talk about barriers and
Speak up a little bit, Rob.
A barrier to getting treatment.
Oh,
We talked about the stigma and the lack of qualified counseling, and didn't talk too much about the cost, the fact that it also costs more money to get there. So what the city or the county do to help to remove some of those barriers to getting there?
I'm not too certain on what the city can do or the state or county, but there are other programs such as like EAP. If you have, your job may supply counseling. It may be a part of your insurance as far as like your mental health benefits, and you may only have to pay a small copay, and so it'll be very healthy to do research as far as like who you can afford to talk to, right? Some therapists are very expensive, because they specialize in certain, areas that, this is what they charge, Then other people accept insurance. I accept all the major insurances, and so, it may be more affordable, to work with me, versus somebody else. But it just really depends on your budget, right? And not talking about you, but we hear that often that therapy costs too much or it's expensive, but so is Jack Daniels. You know what I'm saying? So is weed. And so it's easy to say something costs too much. Maybe it's just not as important to you. And so if it's important to you, you'll figure it out. Because even if it is $60, $70, you don't have to go every week, right? You can do that once a month. And hopefully the therapist gives you some tools, some homework to last you throughout the month, So that way you can continue to work on things until you come back.
so just in case we didn't hear the question, let me just repeat it. The question basically is, what can we do because of the barriers and different things that we have in the way of getting therapy? Basically, what kind of policies governmental policies can we implement to try to maybe take down some of those barriers or at least move them out of the way? And and Andrew talked a little bit about some of the things that we could do, but of course your capacity is not quite able to address the policy issues, but I'll take a stab at it in my capacity as a politico, which is, look, some of these things like reimagining policing can actually work, because we can maybe take some of the dollars that we put towards a lot of the calls and different things and a lot of cities, a lot of counties are doing it throughout the country. A lot of the calls and stuff that police are not equipped to do, we can actually have professionals, or at least ride-alongs, team up, those kind of things. We can put the money put our money where our mouth is, and really, I don't know the percentage, I don't know the number of people who should be in a mental health institution, but are locked up in our county and city jails around the country. But I'm sure they're over 70%, because they probably should not be there. They probably should be somewhere else. So on the policy issue, I think we just have to rethink and reimagine where we put the money at, because like you said, they'll put it in Jack Daniels, they'll put it in weed, they won't think those things, but also the policies in the government are also trying to do what? They're trying to oversee and manage those things, because they want for Jack Daniel to be your first line therapist in weed instead of this guy in some places. So with that, appreciate it, Kevin. You can grab that for me. And before we get out of here, it's about Andrew, go ahead on and look in that camera and let people know how they can get in contact with you, how they can reach you.
Yes, you can find me at yellowbridgetherapy.com. My Instagram is _BeTheBridge. My email is the yellowbridgetherapycenter@gmail.com. And my phone number is 470-530-9828. And that is the office line where you'll speak with my office manager, Shaida. And she'll do all your intake paperwork, ask you about how you want to pay as far as insurance or out of pocket. And so, yeah, well, just call. Let's do a first consultation just to get to know each other. I'll be honest with you. If I feel like I can help you and I can work with you, I'll let you know. And I hope that you be honest with me as well, and letting me know if I'm the right person for you. But at the end of the day, get some help. Find somebody that can help you. because it's important. Your mental health is important. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is very important. And so, you know, sometimes we just need a little guidance, just a little push. And, you know, once we get that, then we can start to see improvement. So, again, I thank you all for your time and just having me on and allowing me to speak about this platform.
Let's give him a round of applause, please. Outstanding job. Outstanding. All right. I also want to send a shout out to my man, Corey Coco, Brother Condre, for taking care of us on the radio, 104.5. Brother, you've been playing me all day. I appreciate it, man. I heard you. I see you. Also want to send a shout out to the wonderful staff here at the Blue Rose. Great food and great presents. We appreciate you guys. And also, you can check out the recorded episodes of the Black Men's Roundtable on YouTube and Facebook at DC Dems. I want to thank our online audience. I also want to thank our in-person audience. I appreciate each and every one of you guys for coming out. Great questions, by the way. And I'm glad we were able to satisfy. I hope we satisfied you anyway. And I want to give, again, just a special thanks to our panelists today. On behalf of Robin Zuniga Ortega, we appreciate you coming out. I appreciate you always supporting us from your place as the chair of the Douglas County Democratic Committee, and I enjoy being your first vice chair. That being said, I want for everyone to stay woke. Don't let them steal our thunder. Don't let them steal our word. Stay woke. Don't let them take it away. Peace. We'll see you next time.